Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude, where I do trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, I review YouTube channels, occasionally I'll review a movie, but really, I just do whatever the hell I want. Hey everybody, what's up? How you doing? Today we're going to do another one from Dark Matter. This is some creepy, disturbing Wikipedia pages. So let's check this one out right now.
Whilst Wikipedia can be a helpful tool for education, it can also lead you down a rabbit hole of creepy stories. So from Wendigo psychosis to the Vampire of Sacramento, join us. Known for its beautiful scenery and collection of wildlife, Yellowstone National Park is an American monument. However, it hides a dark secret, a 50-mile patch of lawless land known as the Zone of Death.
I've heard of that.
A place where anyone can technically commit a crime and never be punished for it. Whilst there's plenty of legal jargon, simply put, a crime committed in the Zone of Death would be constitutionally required to be tried in and include jury members from said zone. But because this area of Yellowstone is uninhabited, a jury couldn't be assembled, and therefore the criminal couldn't have a fair trial, meaning the case would be dropped. In addition, the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction over the park, so state prosecutors wouldn't be able to act either. Yet eerily, despite the government's awareness of the loophole since 2005, it has never been closed, and so the place for the perfect crime remains.
That's bizarre. You'd think they'd close it off.
A famous mythological creature from Native American folklore, the Wendigo is a cannibalistic spirit. According to legends, the Wendigo is said to be a possessed human who suffers from insatiable hunger and will kill anyone to eat. However, whilst this sounds like a simple myth, there is a worrying possibility it's real. In the 19th century, some psychiatrists postulated the existence of Wendigo psychosis, described by experts as culture-bound insanity. Supposedly, it started when a person was forced to partake in cannibalism, at which point they suffered a psychotic break and transformed into a ferocious and frenzied predator. A famous report of this involved a Plains Cree trapper named Swift Runner. During the winter of 1878, he and his family were starving. As such, when their oldest son died, they were forced to eat him. Still, whilst this may have been a horrible but necessary choice, what didn't make sense is why days later, a previously stable Swift suddenly butchered and cannibalized his wife and 5 other children, despite the fact that food supplies were only 25 miles away. Psychiatrists believe that since he turned to cannibalism so near to supplies, and not as a last resort to avoid starvation, he likely suffered from the psychosis. Stallman Syndrome is an extremely rare but terrifying tissue disease. Disturbingly, otherwise minor injuries can lead to new bones forming and replacing the damaged muscle tissue. These bone formations then develop into a second skeleton, which slowly restricts the patient's ability to move. Fortunately though, if that is the word to use, only 80 people suffer from the disease. However, those who do suffer only live for about 40 years. One famous patient was that of Robert Eastlack. Whilst playing with his sister, a 4-year-old Eastlack was hit by a car, injuring his left femur. Initially, there seemed to be no severe consequences, and his leg was placed in a cast. But when it was removed months later, doctors noted the first set of abnormal bone growths. Soon, Eastlack found it difficult to move, and when his parents took him to the hospital out of concern, attempts to treat the condition resulted in the bone plates becoming thicker. Over time, these effects wore on his body, until by 1944, a study confirmed that most of his muscles, tendons and ligaments were now bone. Ultimately, by the end of his life, the 39-year-old Eastlack was left with only the use of his eyes, his lips and his tongue, trapped in his own body.
It's horrible.
One of Sweden's most famous unsolved mysteries, the case of the Atlas vampire continues to confound researchers. On May 4, 1932, the body of 32-year-old sex worker Lily Lindström was found in her small Stockholm apartment. She'd been repeatedly beaten with a blunt object to the back of the head, likely whilst in the midst of sex. However, whilst this seemed like a tragic but typical murder, police were puzzled to discover the body had been completely drained of blood. Disturbingly, a hint to what may have been responsible was laid nearby, in the form of a soup ladle. As expected, this left authorities baffled, and despite intense investigation, the murderer remains unidentified. On the 8th of September 1863, in the village of Digby Deck, Nova Scotia, 8-year-old Charles Albright was walking the beach when he spotted an odd shape by a rock, only to realise upon closer inspection that it was a horrendously injured man. Shockingly, the man's legs had been very recently amputated, with evidence later discovered that confirmed it was the work of a medical professional. Obviously panicked, George alerted his family, who took the man into a nearby cave. Within hours, word had spread of this mysterious person, and the beach became flooded with the public. But despite efforts in various languages, nobody could get the man to speak. Instead, he only uttered one recognisable word, Geron. As such, with no other identification, this would become his name. Unsure of what to do with him, the locals left him with 2 different families, until his death in 1912. However, in all that time, Jerome barely ever spoke, though he did occasionally speak to children. Supposedly, when they asked what happened to his legs, he simply responded, "chains." In other times, meanwhile, he claimed he came from Trieste, and that his ship was called Colombo. Still, apart from these few clues, Jerome lived his life in silence, meaning all theories about who he was are questionable at best.
Wow, that's bizarre. We'll never know what happened to him.
Whilst most people have heard of the Men in Black, few know of phantom social workers, a creepy British phenomenon from the early 1990s. Predominantly 2 women, they would arrive at a person's house under the false pretense that they worked for the council, claiming they were there to investigate the mistreatment of a child. Weirder still, they often had an uncanny knowledge about the owners, often appeared out of nowhere, and never had any number plates on their cars. Additionally, their behaviour was off, and even seemed inhuman. In one notable case, an Elizabeth Copeland of Sheffield was visited by 2 women who identified themselves as part of the NSPCC. Suspicious but concerned, Elizabeth allowed them in, where they examined her 2 toddlers. A few days later, one of the women returned, now with a man. This time, however, they were immediately hostile and demanded the children come with them. Obviously terrified, Elizabeth threatened to call the police, at which point the pair fled.
Wow. Sounds like
Known
someone
as the
just trying to
Vampire of
kidnap the kids to
Sacramento,
me.
Serial killer Richard Chase was convinced he was a literal walking corpse. Unsurprisingly, in his mid-20s, Chase was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia
That's what I was going to say.
institutionalized in 1975. There in the hospital, staff labelled him Dracula after they witnessed him kill and attempt to drink the blood of several different birds. Still, despite Chase's obvious issues, employees were certain they'd rehabilitated him and released him back into the public. This would be a fatal decision. Almost immediately after his release, Chase's fascination with death resurfaced, and he started to capture, kill, and consume various animals. However, this soon lost its thrill, and he decided to move on to another type of prey. From December 29th to January 27th, 1977, Chase brutally killed 6 people.
Wow.
In fitting with his vampire persona, he finished at least 2 of the murders with a drink of their blood. Additionally, Chase told authorities that he believed the victim's unlocked door was a kind of invitation, and he was therefore justified. Dubbed the Beast of Jersey, Edward Louis Pinell was a notorious sex offender who terrorised the Channel Islands between 1960 and 1961. However, whilst this itself is horrific, his crimes were made worse by the outfit he wore during the attacks. Every night, Edward would slip on this monstrous attire and prowl the streets as the Beast. Whilst his victims walked home alone, he would fasten a noose around their neck and force them to an empty nearby field, where he then beat and raped them. Later, meanwhile, Edward turned his attention to all the women, and even young boys, breaking into multiple homes. Disturbingly, witnesses reported how they woke up to see the mask in the corner of the room, before they were suddenly tied up and subjected to his horrifying fantasies. Even worse, it's believed that if Edward hadn't been captured, he would have turned to murder. Eerily, he later admitted that his inspiration was Giles de Rais, a 15th century French knight who supposedly raped, tortured, and murdered over 140 children.
That guy's just evil. Straight up.
Born in Germany in 1977, Karl Tanzler moved to the United States in 1926. Abandoning his wife and daughters, he took up work at a US Marine hospital in Key West, Florida. There he met 21-year-old tuberculosis patient, Maria Hoyos. This would be the start of a twisted and unnerving relationship. Convinced she was the literal woman of his dreams, Tanzler soon professed his love for Maria. However, despite all his efforts, she died from tuberculosis on October 25, 1931. Distraught, Tanzler paid for her funeral, and with the family's approval, he built the mausoleum himself, which he visited every available night. Here he claimed he would routinely speak to Maria's spirit, until 2 years after her death, she begged to come with him. And so in April 1933, after making the necessary preparations, Tanzler removed her corpse from the mausoleum. Back at his house, he reattached the body with wire and coat hangers, before replacing the decomposed skin with silk cloth. Still, whilst this itself is deeply disturbing, it's also believed that he had a necrophilic relationship with Maria's body. Regardless, Tanzler would sleep with her corpse for the next 7 years, until in 1940, her sister confronted him after hearing rumours of his activities. There she was horrified to discover the mummified corpse, and immediately alerted authorities. But since the statute of limitations had already expired, the case was dropped. Yet it seems that Tanzler could never handle life without Maria, and instead used her death mask to create a life-sized effigy, which he lived with until his death.
Wow. That guy, oh my goodness, so in love that it just drove him completely out of his mind, I guess. That was deeply disturbing Wikipedia pages from the channel Dark Matter. That was pretty disturbing. Not as bad as the things you should never Google, though. Now, let's lighten things up with a joke. I was in Walmart the other day and saw this girl who had an ass just like J-Lo. No, Jello. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.